Cholesterol wars. Science combats the number one killer. In the early 20th century, a new epidemic was quietly taking root. Heart attacks, sudden, deadly, and poorly understood, began killing millions. No one knew why. Today, coronary heart disease is no longer a mystery. It's a story of one of medicine's greatest triumphs, a battle fought in labs, clinics, kitchens, and boardrooms. This is the story of cholesterol and how we turned a silent killer into a preventable disease. In 2021, the global average or most common life expectancy was just over 70 years. Just 200 years ago, it was less than half. In 1800, no region of the world had an average life expectancy higher than 40 years. This upward trend in age of death was the result of advances in efforts to improve health, including nutrition, clean water, sanitation, neonatal health care, antibiotics, and vaccines. Many breakthroughs in technology and public health initiatives occurred in the 19th and 20th century, as well as better living standards driven by economic growth and declining poverty. By the 1940s, people were living longer, but a new killer emerged: coronary heart disease. Men in particular were dropping dead in their 50s. At its peak in the mid-20th century, coronary heart disease claimed over 500,000 lives annually in the United States alone. That's nearly 1,400 people every single day, about 60 people every hour. Imagine a full passenger plane going down every single hour of every day. Doctors had theories: stress, smoking, maybe even personality, but there were no answers for the surging sudden deaths. There was no doubt about the vital role our heart plays in health and disease. After all, the heart is our first mover and our lifelong giver of life itself. Before we ever take a breath, before we open our eyes, before the brain sparks with thought, the heart is already at work. Around 3 weeks after conception, a cluster of cells in the embryo begins to pulse. This is the heart's earliest form. It is, quite literally, the first organ to function in the human body. From that point on, the heart never stops. Day and night, year after year, it moves blood through nearly 60,000 miles of blood vessels, delivering oxygen, nutrients, hormones, immune cells, and carrying away waste. It powers everything else, quietly and tirelessly. On average, your heart beats over 100,000 times a day. That's more than 35 million times a year. By the time you're 80, it may have beaten over 3 billion times. And we rarely think about it, that is, unless something goes wrong. That's why heart disease is so devastating. It's not just a single condition. It's a complex family of disorders that affect the very engine of our existence. When the heart struggles, every other organ struggles too. From our first weeks of life to our last breath, the heart is the one constant, a faithful, hardworking internal companion we can't live without. So understanding the heart and circulatory system that supports every second of our lives and learning how to protect it was a major mission for physicians, medical researchers, and scientists in the face of this epidemic. The Framingham Heart Study began in 1948. Its goal? To find the causes of heart disease by tracking over 5,000 residents for decades. Led by Dr. Thomas Dauber and later Dr. William Cannell, the Framingham study would change everything. These researchers started noticing patterns in the blood, patient behavior, and vital signs. By the 1950s, Framingham scientists started connecting the dots. People with higher blood pressure, smoking habits, and cholesterol levels were far more likely to develop heart disease. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, a physiologist named Ancel had a controversial idea. Maybe fat, especially saturated fat, was driving the cholesterol epidemic. Key's 7-country study launched in 1958. It would show that cultures eating less saturated fat had lower cholesterol and fewer heart attacks. His findings were explosive. The food industry pushed back hard, but the scientific momentum had begun. These epidemiological observations led to actions in policy and healthcare. In 1977, Senator George McGovern chaired a committee that issued the first ever national dietary guidelines. We recommend Americans reduce their intake of saturated fats and cholesterol to lower the risk of heart disease. The now controversial food pyramid was born. Cholesterol checks became routine, and scientists, inspired by this progress, asked a new question. Could we lower cholesterol with a drug? Dr. Akira Endo, a 33-year-old Japanese biochemist who during his childhood was inspired by Alexander Fleming, the scientist behind the discovery of penicillin from a fungus, was working at Sankyo, later known as Daiichi Sankyo, in Tokyo. Dr. Endo identified a fungus that inhibited an enzyme involved in cholesterol synthesis. The result? A dramatic drop in the low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, also known as LDL. The first statin. HMG-CoA reductase is a protein that your liver uses to make cholesterol, which your body needs for things like building cells and making hormones. But when we have too much cholesterol, inhibiting this enzyme lowers circulating cholesterol levels. In 1987, Merck's lovastatin, Mevacor, became the first statin approved by the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. Several other statin medicines were discovered by pharmaceutical companies, and large clinical trials exploring LDL cholesterol lowering impact on disease expanded. But was cholesterol truly the villain, or just a bystander? Enter human genetics. Families with a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, also known as FH, can have sky-high LDL from birth. Heterozygous FH, which means that one of the copies of the gene is abnormal, occurs in every 1 in 500 people and results in about twice the normal blood levels of LDL, often leading to heart attacks as early as age 35. When both copies of the gene are defective, known as homozygous disease, which occurs in about 1 in every million people, LDL levels can reach 6 times normal, and astonishingly, they can have heart attacks by the age of 5 years. Researchers Dr. Michael Brown and Dr. Joseph Goldstein at UT Southwestern found that mutations leading to defects in the functions of the LDL receptor were linked to high levels of LDL and increased risk. They were jointly awarded the Nobel Prize of Physiology for their work in 1985. FH patients weren't just unlucky. They were genetically wired to have a higher chance of heart disease. At the same institution, Dr. Helen Hobbs' team identified rare mutations in a protein called PCSK9, which led to a lifelong reduction in LDL cholesterol levels and an 88% lower risk of coronary heart disease events. This is the best-known example of what scientists call the gene dose effect. This is when bidirectional changes associated with mutations in a gene in people teaches us about the biological function, relationship to disease, and potential safety concerns if we try and make a drug to modify the gene or its products. The LDL theory wasn't just an observation, it was causal. Now came the real test. Could lowering LDL save lives? The 4S trial, 1994. Simvastatin reduced mortality by 30%. Then WASCOPS, HPS, and the Jupiter trial. One after another, the trials proved it. Lowering LDL reduced heart attacks, strokes, and death. Statins don't just improve lab numbers, they save lives. This was translational medicine at its best. Hypothesis, mechanism, intervention, outcome. Millions began taking statins. Coronary mortality began to fall. By the 2010s, the statins were a public health tool. Guidelines recommended them based on individual cardiovascular risk, not just cholesterol levels. New drugs like PCSK9 inhibitors emerged. Statins remained the foundation, but controversy grew. Concerns about muscle pain, diabetes, side effects. Much of it was overblown. Statins are in fact among the safest drugs we've ever developed. The benefits dramatically outweigh the risks. Today, over 200 million people worldwide take a statin. They are part of a global cardiovascular revolution. Why does this story matter? This is more than a story about cholesterol. It's about how we do science. A question born in a small Massachusetts town, validated by global studies, confirmed by human genetics, translated into drugs, and saved millions. Medical researchers don't just identify risk, they do something about it. Epidemiology, genetics, pharmacology, drug discovery, clinical research, public health, industry, and government. When they align, this is what's possible. And yet, our battle against heart disease is not complete. Coronary heart disease is still the most common cause of death. It killed 371,506 people in 2022. As our lifestyle and access to excess nutrients like sugar have changed, the heart and other key organs remain prone to damage. According to the CDC in 2024, someone in the United States has a heart attack every 40 seconds. Think about 720 people having a heart attack every night as we sleep every single day. That adds up to 805,000 heart attacks per year, and about 1 in 5 of those heart attacks are silent. The damage is done, but the person doesn't even know it. Our bodies are pretty good at surveilling for damage and repairing it, but too much damage to the heart leads to another looming health problem that many people live with and perish from: heart failure. Just like the race to reduce coronary heart disease, a similar effort is underway in labs and clinics to help people with heart failure. Thanks for listening to The Cholesterol Wars, a story of translational medicine in action. Next time, we explore how the treatment of psoriasis has changed over the last quarter of a century. If you like this episode, please share and subscribe to Therapeutic Momentum Podcasts.